HOA enforcer assaulted my dad, didn't know he runs the county sheriff's office. If I hadn't been home that morning, they might have broken his ribs. That's the thought that haunts me now, how close it came to going too far. How a man with no real authority, no real badge, and no real soul grabbed my father and dragged him across our lawn like he was nothing. All because of a fence. My name's Maya Carson. I'm 22, fresh out of college, and I came home to Willow Oaks to help my dad after his hip surgery. I thought I was coming home to rest, heal, maybe find some clarity. Instead, I came home to a war disguised as a neighborhood. It started with the fence. Dad had it installed last month. 6 feet tall, treated cedar, nothing fancy. Just enough to give us some privacy on the side where Karen's place borders ours. Karen Witherspoon, the self-appointed president of the Willow Oaks Neighborhood Preservation Council. Not a real HOA, just a bunch of retirees with clipboards and time. Or at least, that's what we thought. My dad's name is Sheriff Curtis Carson, but around here, folks just call him Kurt. He's the kind of man who says ma'am without irony, keeps his boots polished, and still believes in handshakes that mean something. He served as sheriff of Eastlake County for almost 10 years. Before that, he was a deputy for 15. He's respected, feared by criminals, admired by locals. But after his hip surgery, he took leave 6 weeks at home. No badge, no uniform, just rehab and peace. That's when Karen decided he was weak. The first warning came in an envelope, a typed letter with bold red lettering across the top. Notice of fence violation. Structure does not comply with neighborhood sightline standards. We laughed at first. Sightline standards. This was private property. The fence didn't face the street. It was legal under county code my dad helped write. He called it nonsense. Tossed the letter. 3 days later, the second letter came with a fine of $325 and a threat to escalate to enforcement. That's when he said, "This woman's gone off the rails." He was right. It was a Wednesday. Bright sky. Light breeze. I was inside sorting laundry when I heard yelling out front. I stepped onto the porch just in time to see a black SUV jump the curb and swerve onto our grass. 2 men in matching vests stepped out. On the back, HOA enforcement unit, property compliance officer. It was laughable, like cosplay for bitter suburbanites. But then they got serious. They walked straight up to my dad, who was seated on a chair in the front yard, reading the paper, and one of them grabbed him by the arm. "You've been cited 3 times, the larger man barked. "You're now in structural noncompliance. This fence is an eyesore and violates Section 12B of the Charter." My dad looked up, calm but sharp. "Get your hand off me, son. You don't give orders anymore." "Old man," the guy snarled. "You're in HOA custody until this violation is processed." "HOA custody," I said, storming down the steps. "You can't be serious." But he didn't listen. He yanked my father out of the chair. The fall wasn't graceful. My dad's body slammed to the ground with a hard thud. His cane clattered to the concrete. He groaned, then winced, one hand clutching his side. And then his wallet fell out. The badge flipped onto the grass. Not a novelty badge. Not a souvenir. The real thing. Sheriff of Eastlake County, Curtis A. Carson. The fake cop froze. His hand hovered midair. His face turned pale. Then he stammered. "I didn't know," he didn't say. But it was too late, because I had my phone out, recording, streaming, and by the time the real deputies rolled up 5 minutes later, half the town had already seen it. My dad bruised, angry, and tired, but still composed. The man who dragged him zip-tied, crying, begging, and Karen nowhere to be found. It took 24 hours for the video to go viral in our town, and 72 before the story hit state news. Sheriff assaulted by fake HOA cop in front yard Eastlake. Man dragged by HOA enforcer turns out. He's the sheriff, fake police. Real felony HOA under fire in Willow Oaks. But what the headlines missed, what they couldn't capture, was the way people's eyes changed when they saw us at the grocery store. Some lowered their gaze, A shame they hadn't spoken out sooner. Others walked up with tears in their eyes, stories on their lips, and all of it led back to Karen. The day after the arrest, I knocked on her door. I wasn't angry, I was ready. Karen opened it wearing her signature pastel cardigan and that fake plastic badge clipped to her chest like she'd earned it in combat. Well, she said, smug, I assume you're here to apologize. You people turned a simple enforcement into a circus. I blinked. You assaulted the sheriff. Karen huffed. He should have disclosed his position. We assumed he was just another elderly homeowner resisting compliance. We were within community charter guidelines. There is no charter that permits assault. There is, she snapped, stepping out onto the porch, a right to preserve neighborhood standards. That fence is a visual blight. It disrupts cohesion. And who decides what counts as a blight? I asked. Her smile cracked. The board. I leaned in. There is no board. Karen, your HOA isn't recognized by the county. Your charter was dissolved 3 years ago. She froze, but only for a second. We reorganized, she said quickly. Private neighborhood preservation entities are allowed under Georgia code. You're quoting legal fiction. We checked the records. You're not registered with the state HOA registry. You never refiled after Crest Hill Development collapsed. You're a private club with clipboards and delusions of authority. Her smile disappeared. You're just a bully, I added, and now everyone knows it. Later that night, Ellie, a friend from high school who now works in zoning enforcement, sent me a Dropbox folder. Inside hundreds of PDFs, Karen's HOA had created fake violations. Entire templates, editable citation slips, with drop-downs for infraction type, fine amount, and action required. It was a literal citation factory. Mr. Zhao fined $150 for non-regulation mailbox height. The Patterson twins fined $400 for operating illegal lemonade sales without permit. Mrs. Bennett fined $75 for unsanctioned plant species in visible yard. And she cashed every check into a separate HOA compliance account totally outside the legal books. I stared at it in disbelief. This isn't just petty. I told Ellie. This is extortion. Ellie nodded. We estimate she pulled in $89,000 in 2 years. Once word got out, the town cracked open. My inbox flooded. Stories poured in. One woman, Janine, wrote she told me if I didn't pay the fine for my wind chimes, she'd get Child Protective Services involved. A man named Carlos called me shaking. She blocked my driveway with cones for weeks, said my truck didn't fit the HOA aesthetic. I missed 2 work shifts, but the worst, a teenager named Leah DM'd me on Instagram. My dad cried after they towed our car. It wasn't even broken. Karen said it was inoperable because it was dirty. We couldn't afford to get it back for 3 weeks. They had suffered in silence because they thought Karen had the law on her side. She didn't, and I had proof. By Saturday, my dad was back on his feet with a bandaged wrist and a fire in his eyes. He hadn't put on the badge again yet, but his tone had shifted. We need to call a public meeting, he said. Town hall, no hiding. We lay it all out. I nodded. I'll back you, and we'll stream it, too? He smiled. Good. Let's bring light where there's been shade. The town hall that night was packed wall to wall, standing room only. Folks crowding the aisles, murmuring, filming. You could feel it in the air, that hum of reckoning, the kind that only comes when a community has spent too long being quiet. And in the center of it all sat Karen, pressed blazer, her fake badge gleaming, a thick folder in her lap like a shield. But she didn't know we weren't just here to accuse her. We were here to prove it. Dad had returned to his post as sheriff that morning, officially ending his medical leave. When he entered the room in uniform, hat, badge, holster, the entire hall erupted in applause. Karen flinched. Her eyes darted. She hadn't expected him to rise this quickly. But Dad didn't gloat. He stepped up to the mic and said, "Thank you. Tonight's not about me. It's about us. It's about how one person convinced us she had power over our lives and how we let her. But not anymore." He motioned to the screen. I clicked play. We projected it all blown up on a 10-foot wall. The fake citations, the forged HOA charter, the bank deposit slips, the map showing which properties had been flagged and fined, the HOA enforcement patrol routes with dates and notes, fence too dark, car too old, person appears transient. People gasped, cried, some shouted. We even showed surveillance footage from Ellie's dash cam, Karen's enforcer stopping her illegally last fall and trying to issue a vehicle conformity fine. Then we showed the county records. Nothing about Karen's HOA was real. It had been dissolved, defunct, dead on paper for years. What Karen ran was a private racket masked as a civic body fueled by intimidation and fake authority. She stood and marched to the front, folder clutched like a Bible. "This is a witch hunt," she cried. "These people don't care about community. They care about chaos. I've tried to create order, a place where things are neat, safe, respectable." My dad raised his hand calmly. Respectable doesn't mean controlling, neat doesn't mean cruel, and safe doesn't mean silenced. Karen turned to me. This is personal for you, isn't it? Your generation doesn't understand structure," I stepped forward. "Structure without accountability is tyranny. And you built a castle out of fake rules and fear." The room broke into applause again. Karen's hands trembled. Her folder fell open and dozens of blank citation slips spilled out across the floor. A visual metaphor if I'd ever seen one. And then came the moment I never expected. Karen didn't walk out. She collapsed into a chair, and through gritted teeth and trembling breath, she whispered into the mic, "You all loved it when it worked in your favor. When I cited your noisy neighbor or the teen with the loud car, you said thank you. You looked the other way until I cited you. So don't pretend I did this alone." Dead silence. And she wasn't entirely wrong. Because a system like this doesn't thrive without silence, without complicity, without people enjoying someone else being kept in line. But it only takes one injustice too far to break that silence. And that was my dad. By the end of the night, the sheriff's department opened a criminal investigation. Karen was placed under house arrest pending charges. Her enforcers were suspended from neighborhood watch participation. Some arrested. The HOA bank account was frozen. And the county zoning board ordered a full audit of all HOA-related activities across the region. And we didn't go home with satisfaction. We went home with clarity that the badge on your chest doesn't define justice. Your actions do. In the days that followed the town hall, everything started cracking wide open. People stopped whispering and started testifying. And with every new revelation, it became clear that Karen's fake HOA wasn't just a scam, it was a system. One designed to control, humiliate, and punish. And like every system built on fear, it had roots deeper than we'd imagined. Karen was officially charged with criminal impersonation of a public official, assault and battery of a public servant, forgery, wire fraud, mail fraud, illegal surveillance, extortion, false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and under the state's new HOA regulation statute, fraudulent civic enforcement. But that wasn't the end, because as investigators dug into her finances and HOA records, they uncovered something even darker. We found it on a flash drive seized from her SUV, a spreadsheet titled Code Orange Residence Watch List. Inside over 200 names, each with details: race, profession, political signs posted, number of guests per week, notes like talks too loud, mows lawn after 7 p.m., kids walk barefoot. People weren't being fined at random. Karen and her board had been targeting anyone who didn't fit their vision of the neighborhood: young renters, people of color, working-class families, LGBTQ+ couples, elderly with mobility issues. This wasn't about compliance. This was systemic harassment. Ellie and the county IT team traced Karen's surveillance network doorbell cams wired into shared cloud storage, even a drone she used to fly over problem homes. One couple, who had quietly raised concerns about Karen's conduct, found they'd been filmed through their bedroom window. A family who refused to repaint their fence had their mail lost for 2 months because Karen's enforcers had manipulated USPS forwarding data through forged compliance relocation letters. She didn't just want rule followers. She wanted rule worshippers. We weren't about to let her legacy of fear fizzle into headlines and lawsuits. My dad formed what he called the Work Unit Willow Oaks Reform Coalition. We brought together victims, county officials, zoning officers, civil rights advocates, and even ex-enforcers who turned whistleblowers. We drafted what would become the Community Accountability Bill, requiring all HOA actions to be registered and reviewed annually. Any community group with enforcement capacity to be publicly elected, anonymous citation systems to be banned, surveillance used in neighborhoods to be disclosed and consent-based. And while we worked, the community transformed. People painted fences together, kids chalked up the sidewalks again, old men who hadn't spoken in years shook hands across property lines. The fear gone. But she wasn't done. Even under house arrest, Karen had one final move. She filed a civil countersuit against my dad, claimed excessive force, public defamation, and abuse of power. She demanded $500 in damages. We laughed, then we got serious. Because if she won even one count, it would send the message that fake authority could still bite back. So we got ready. One last showdown. The courtroom was overflowing. Camera crews lined the steps outside. Inside, it felt more like a reckoning than a trial, because everyone knew this wasn't just Karen's final move. It was a test of how far fake authority could go before real justice stood its ground. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table like she always had, perfectly groomed, perfectly smug, as if the badge she'd forged was still pinned to her chest. She'd sued my dad for defamation, emotional trauma, and misuse of public platform to target a civic servant. But this time, the world was watching, and this time, we had the truth. The judge called me to the stand, not my dad, me, because I was the one who saw her enforcer drag him. I was the one who filmed it, posted it, started the fire. My hands shook when I was sworn in, but I looked Karen straight in the eye as I spoke. Karen didn't just lie about authority. She lived the lie. She printed fake laws, issued fake fines, and created a culture of fear in our town. And when my father, our sheriff, stood up to her, she didn't back down. She tried to break him. She didn't know who he was because she didn't care who any of us were. We were obstacles to her control, but now we see her. All of us. And we're not afraid anymore. There was no sound in the room when I finished. Not even the rustle of papers. Just silence. And Karen's face, blank because she had finally run out of spin. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Unanimous. Karen's countersuit was dismissed with prejudice. She was fined for court costs, and the presiding judge issued a rare statement from the bench. This court affirms that titles are earned, not claimed. Authority is given, not taken. And in this community, the law belongs to the people, not to those who fabricate it for personal power. Within a month, the Willow Oaks Reform Bill passed countywide. Karen was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her role in the fake HOA racket. Her home was seized and auctioned to repay victims. The HOA officers she employed most took plea deals. Some even helped install the new community board, one with real oversight, transparency, and election rules. And my dad, he ran for re-election that November, unopposed. I still remember the day we framed my dad's old badge, the one that fell on the lawn the day she dragged him. We mounted it beside the folded-up citation Karen had left him. We call it the reminders wall, because authority isn't just about who's got the louder voice. It's about who speaks when it matters. I used to think HOA politics were for bored people with too much time, but now I know better. It's about power, and how easy it is for someone to weaponize it when no one pushes back. Karen built a kingdom on silence. We tore it down with truth. And I hope anyone reading this remembers, it doesn't take a badge to stand up. It just takes one person brave enough to say, "That's not right." Have you ever witnessed someone abuse fake authority in your neighborhood or community? Do you think HOA power should be more closely monitored? Where do you draw the line between order and oppression? Speak up. Share your story. Let others know silence enables abuse, but truth changes everything.